your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us. While campaigning in Brampton, Ontario, Mark Carney announced a slate of public safety measures, including the revamping of the gun buyback program and revoking gun licenses for people convicted of violent offences.
If elected, my government will automatically revoke gun licenses for individuals convicted of violent offences, including intimate partner violence. We will strengthen firearms licensing and the so-called yellow and red flag laws that keep weapons out of the hands of those who are a risk to themselves or others. We will invest in the RCMP's National Forensic Laboratories in Ottawa and Surrey and the Saskatchewan Ballistics Lab to increase our capacity to track down guns used in crimes. We will quickly, and I mean quickly, reinvigorate the buyback of assault-style firearms and leave the classification of new firearm models to the RCMP, to the experts, not to the gun industry.
Carney is also promising to hire 1,000 more CBSA officers to add more scanners and drones to stem the flow of drugs and guns into the country from the United States. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was also in the GTA this week, announcing a plan to cut the cost of building new homes for cities. Poilievre says these tax cuts will save Canadians up to $100,000 per home.
I'll do this by, one, incentivizing municipalities to cut building taxes, and two, by eliminating the federal sales tax on new homes. Each of those measures will save up to $50,000 on the cost of a single home. That's a total of $100,000. In fact, the GST elimination will be even more powerful in big centres like the GTA and the Greater Vancouver area, because there housing is more expensive, and therefore the value of that tax cut will be as much as $65,000 alone, on top of the new tax cuts that I'm announcing today through these municipal incentives. My government will also require municipalities to publicly report their development charges and explain how the federal reimbursement will be used so Canadian municipalities are accountable when they reduce these fees.
Poilievre says these rising municipal development fees have led to a reduction in housing starts. He says these cuts will reverse that trend. Meanwhile, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he wants to ban foreign home buyers in Canada. Now, speaking of the NDP leader, he says that he's worried about the message being sent after a member of the Saskatchewan legislature called him a terrorist.
There is an MLA from Saskatchewan that I've learned now has referred to me as a terrorist. I'm an adult. I'm a leader of a national party. I'm an elected official. I'm a lawyer. I don't care that they said that about me. It's not about me. But I am worried about why someone would say that. This is an MLA, someone that's an elected official, respected member of their community, a former teacher. What would make someone say something like that? This is, I'm assuming, a very educated person. On a quick Google, you know that this is completely false. I am a lawyer in good standing. I've passed the bar. I've been called to the bar. I have high security clearance at the federal level. This is clearly a lie. What message does it send to a young kid growing up in Saskatchewan who might look different, who might wear a head covering, who might wrap their head, a young woman, a young boy? What does it say to them when an elected official of their province is lying about somebody else, calling them a negative term like that? What does it say to that kid? That's what I'm worried about, the message it sends and how it basically opens the door to people to discriminate folks just based on the way they look.
Saskatchewan Party MLA Raquel Hilbert apologized and retracted her remarks in a brief speech before the House. New polls are supporting evidence that Western Canadians are considering the move of secession from Canada if the Liberals are to win in the federal election. In an Angus Reid poll, about 25% or a quarter of Albertans would initially vote towards a referendum in becoming a new country. That percent rises to 30% if the Liberals win a fourth term in government. In Saskatchewan, the results show that 20% would vote yes initially, but will spike to 33% if the Liberals win. In another poll from March by Main Street Research, a combined 37% of Albertans are either somewhat or strongly in favor of the idea of separating from Canada, either through an independent Alberta or with other Western provinces. 25% would vote in favor of separation in a theoretical referendum, a stat mirroring that of the Angus Reid result. And separation sentiment is slightly lower than it was reported in 2019, and Quebec remains more passionate for secession, with 28% of Quebecers in favor. It looks like the prorogation of Parliament's challenge is not over yet, as a federal court's dismissal of it is now being appealed. If you'll recall, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his decision to prorogue Parliament on January the 6th, sparking a national conversation about the scope of a Prime Minister's power to shut down Parliament. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms challenged it in court. It was dismissed, and the JCCF filed their appeal on April the 5th with the Federal Court of Appeal. In their appeal, the applicants invite the Federal Court of Appeal to consider two main questions raised in their January 7th application. What is the scope of a Prime Minister's power to advise prorogation? And did the Prime Minister's January 6th decision fall within that scope or not? Andre Mamari is an attorney with the JCCF. We asked how confident he is that the Court of Appeal will hear their argument and agree with it.
Before we get to the actual merits, there is an issue of mootness. Naturally, people ask the question, well, Parliament is no longer prorogued, and so can the court even hear this case? It's moot. And the answer to that is the court does have discretion to hear a case that is moot. And this case is very important. It's important that the law is very clear about a Prime Minister's power to prorogue Parliament, because of course we're going to be here. We're going to be at this question again at some point in the future with the next Prime Minister, whoever that may be. And so, for clarity, not just for Canadians, but also for the Prime Minister, for the Privy Council, to have clarity surrounding this prerogative power is necessary. In terms of confidence about what the outcome is, I really can't say.
Mamari adds this is an important constitutional case for Canadians, as it could set a precedent for future prime ministers. The battle for Canada continues with election 2025, with the future direction of our country on the line. Joining Jeanette Roche in studio to chat about our federal election is Tanner Hidey. He is an economic analyst from Lloydminster, Alberta area, a political commentator, and a public speaker.
Far more needs to be done than just cutting GST. We've had these low interest rates in Canada for how many years? They were artificially low, right? They were set to be so very low, as to then entice individuals who otherwise wouldn't be able to purchase a home to purchase a home. To be entirely honest, they didn't have the capital that was required to do so, but they were told by these low interest rates to buy right now. Now is the time to buy. It's cheap. It's cheap. And then when the lockdowns came and people were working from home, that demand only increased. More and more people wanted a nice home to live because that's where they were working. And so with that increase, that spike in demand brought on by low interest rates and the lockdowns, you saw this massive jump in prices. Because of course, every builder knew there was money to be made right now. And along with this massive immigration that the country has, people need places to live. Lots of people need places to live. The demand continued to rise. And with that, an increase in the price of homes. So what do you do to stop the problem? Well, first, I'm convinced you have to cut immigration. I think it has to be zero, to be entirely honest, because you have to slow the demand, right? The first thing you do when the bathtub is overflowing is turn off the tap, right? You don't wait to do that, you do that first. And then you have to allow interest rates to move as they want to move. It's wrong to artificially restrict them so that they're so very low, giving these buyers a false impression of what the market is actually like. So there are multiple steps that need to be taken simply to introduce common sense into the interest rate markets and just the market in general, again, to try and stop the housing crisis.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, here's an interesting one here. So, Tanner, one of the strange things about this election is to see that seniors who typically lean towards the Conservatives are supporting the Liberals these days. Well, the young people have now switched to leaning Conservative. What do you think is the driver behind that?
Well, I think with regards to the seniors, I think many seniors are concerned about change. You know, they've lived as they've lived for many, many years, and what Mr. Poilievre is proposing, and Mr. Bernier and so on too, are the change is radically different compared to what the Liberals have introduced and implemented in Canada over the last 10 years. And so I think there is a real fear among seniors that if there's this massive change, this large shift, that, you know, their way of life will be disrupted seriously. But on the flip side, the younger generation, we can't afford homes. We can't afford to, you know, work only one job. We can't afford to have children and so on. And we're realizing that the economic situation is so much worse than what has been told to us by so many individuals. And so you can only deny reality for so long. You know, it's no wonder young individuals want to change. This way of life that they've been promised is not coming to pass. And so they're, you know, they want to try and make something different to increase their chances of having this life which we, you know, which we desire.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the economy needs a major boost, doesn't it? And the Canadian public is now asking for coast-to-coast pipelines to be built. And it looks like Mark Carney has noticed this and is now promising to speed up major natural resource project approvals. But earlier in the campaign, he went on record stating that he will not repeal Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill, as it's known, right? So what do you make of this, Tanner?
Oh, that no pipelines will be built under Mr. Carney. You know, Bill C-69 is so damaging for the energy markets. It allows so much regulatory uncertainty into the markets that investors who want to build big energy projects in Canada really have no desire to do so, because there's no guarantee that after they've built their project, the federal government won't shut down that project. And therefore that investor might lose billions and billions of dollars. And so you have all of this hold up right now in Canada's economic markets. And unless you repeal bills like C-69 and C-48, that hold up won't go away. It won't be reduced. And so I think Mr. Carney's talk is just that. It's all talk.
Interesting. Okay, so Tanner, there's a lot of chatter in Western Canada with regard to the possibility of Alberta and perhaps even Saskatchewan separating, especially if Carney wins. So what are you hearing? Is this just talk or is it serious?
No, I'm hearing the same. There is a lot of talk about this, about the movement for independence and separation. I think it is serious. I think Albertans and the West at large, for that matter, is tired of the way that they've been treated over the last not just 1 or 2 or 5 years, but decades on decades on decades. And we're realizing that we've realized that what Ottawa is trying to pursue right now will completely transform our way of life into something that we do not want it to be. So yes, that momentum for independence right now is roaring. And I think should Mr. Carney be elected on the 28th, it's only going to explode.
It's really different times right now, and this feels like such a different election. Do you think that the outcome will be higher in terms of voter turnout? Oh,
yes, I would imagine so. I would think so, especially with how Mr. Poilievre has galvanized so many Conservatives to his rallies. I think the Liberal side and the NDP side and so on of the political aisle recognize that and see that, and I think it will galvanize them too to head to the polls and vote for Mr. Carney or whoever they choose. So yes, I would expect a high voter turnout. If it wasn't high, that would surprise me.
And to share his thoughts on the 2025 federal election, I sat down with Dr. John Robson. He is a professor at Augustine College, a columnist with the National Post, Loonie Politics, and the Epoch Times. Take a look.
This, to me, is in fact exactly the question. Had he had an answer, whether he'd said, well, I filed them in Canada, or whether he'd said, you know, I got behind and I was still filing from Britain, but I'm fixing that. Or if he'd said, actually, legally speaking, because of where the income was, I had to file there. Any of these answers would have been fine. But the one of, what, how dare you ask me, you peasants? What is my wealth to you? You wouldn't even recognize it if you saw it. This kind of attitude on his part, one of the things about Carney that's odd is he seems to react very badly to being challenged. And you'd think an international titan of finance would have been sitting in board meetings where there was a vigorous exchange of ideas. And people would sometimes have said to him, no, you're wrong about that. Or how can you put that forward as a sensible idea? You'd think he'd have been dealing with other giants of finance at Davos, and they'd have been, you know, having a clash of ideas. But instead, he seems to be astonished and offended when asked even fairly basic things. And, you know, no wonder his handlers want him to bore his way into power, because when he goes off script, and this was also true of Justin Trudeau, the result is pretty much, you know, tongue in the electric socket. They must be sitting there horrified every time he starts improvising.
Now, with the threat of U.S. tariffs, Canadians seem to be more favorable towards building pipelines. And now the Liberals suddenly do a complete about-face promising to speed up major natural resource project approvals, but yet Mark Carney is still on the record stating that he will not repeal Bill C-69, which is the more pipelines bill. Can you decipher this for us?
Well, yeah, this is, and again, I think Carney's digging himself a deep hole because he seems to be one of these politicians who will say anything. I mean, you try squaring what he's now saying about conventional energy with what's in his book, Values, but who will also tell you that he's going to obstruct and build these energy programs in such a way that his words don't even seem to relate to one another, let alone to his thoughts, whatever they might be. You never get the feeling that Mark Carney is getting in trouble because he's thinking aloud from first principles in a way that isn't all that polished. You get the feeling that he's, again, tongue and brain are just disconnected from one another, and possibly internally they have breakdowns of communication as well. And this is all the stuff, I mean, he's meant to be this, steady at the helm, international banker, understands economics better than anybody, didn't Doug Ford say? And yet he doesn't talk like a guy whose problem is that he's too intellectual or too coherent. He talks like a guy who just seems to have no idea what he's saying or how any of it would connect. And this is very much not what we were expecting. Smoothly wrong would be one thing, but this, none of it adds up, and it's all sort of tongue-tied. Not to mention his French. He says he's fine in French. Well, let me tell you something. My French isn't that great, and I know it. But compared to him, I'm Voltaire.
Now, there continues to be rumblings of Western separation. Should the Liberals win a fourth straight term, does this thing have any legs?
Yeah, well, Western separation is one of those issues that I think is actually quite a dangerous sleeper, because I know some people out in the West who are telling me if Central Canada gives Mark Carney another mandate and he does what Justin Trudeau did, it will break the country up. And when you raise this, a lot of otherwise fairly sensible commentators in Central and Eastern Canada call you a traitor or say something else that isn't just wrong, but is insulting. And, I recently posted on X, I said, remember Conquest's second law, which is that every large organization behaves as though it were controlled by a cabal of its enemies. And then I said, if you're worried about Western separation or this talk about it, there's two things you need to do. First, figure out what might make it more likely. And second, don't do that thing. And sneering at Westerners and ridiculing Western alienation is the worst possible way. If they were able to say, look, we realize that in the history of Canada, the West has often gotten unfair and even condescending treatment, and that's not going to happen again. We're all in this together, and that means we will listen to you. We will worry about your concerns. You're not always going to get what you want, but you're not just going to get the back of the hand. Instead, they go, oh, yuck, yuck, what a bunch of rubes, har, har. And years ago, a boss of mine said, if the West ever does decide to separate, they'll call a referendum, print the ballots, hold the vote, and leave, while people like Andrew Coyne are still sneering, ew, that could never happen.
Canada's economic problems appear to stem from the Liberal government. That is according to political reporter Brian Lilley. Take a look.
Well, I think it depends on who's voting. As we look at the polling, we'll talk about the generational gap in a little bit, but you've got one group of voters that is just obsessed with Donald Trump and the tariffs, and then you've got another group of voters who are saying, no, look, my big issue is affordability, the cost of living, housing, economic issues. So as Harper pointed out, the rising crime that we're experiencing is not a result of Donald Trump and the tariffs. The broken immigration system that we have, we used to have the most, widely thought of immigration system in the world. It was like, Canada works. We should all go study Canada. And now it's broken. It's a mess.
If you've ever visited Drumheller, you might be familiar with Tyra the Tyrannosaurus. She's a popular tourist attraction that towers over the Drumheller skyline in the Canadian Badlands. Well, there's an end to send her into a proverbial tar pit, and it sparked demands that she could be spared. The Chamber plans to dismantle Tyra in 2029, but local residents and the town want to find a way to keep her where she is.
To me, it's like if you had the Eiffel Tower or Big Ben and somebody on social posted this and made me think about it, and you said, it was cool, we had fun with the Eiffel Tower, but we're tearing it down. people would lose it worldwide. Like you don't take away monuments, and this may not be designated as a World Heritage Site or a monument or anything special to the world, but it's special to the world, and so I want to make sure that it stays where it is.
We are the dinosaur capital of the world, and world's largest dinosaur has been very iconic in our community. So, yeah, we're going to look for some solutions and how do we resolve this. Where there's a will, there's a way, and the community is very passionate about their dinosaurs. And as you can see by all the conversations going on, that the community loves the dinosaurs, and so do many people that come and visit. So, yeah, I always try and find solutions.
So we adopted a new strategic plan last year, and part of that was to look at the dinosaur and the future of the dinosaur. So the board knew there was, a limited lifespan of the dinosaur, and these decisions had to be made in the future. So also at the time, we were renegotiating our lease with the town, and they offered us a 5-year lease, which aligned with our decision that we had made. So as of the end of 2029, the lease will end, and we will vacate and dismantle the dinosaur as per the clause in our lease.
Well, we've got 5 years, right? So what can we do in 5 years? And is it we keep it? Is it we do something else, right? Like, let's just really think about what we want to do. And I hope we keep it. She's an amazing asset to the town, but let's just see what we can do.
Monday kicked off Tourism Week, and with the busy summer tourism season around the corner, the mayor of Jasper, Alberta, is encouraging people to include the town in their travel plans. Mayor Richard Ireland says the fire-ravaged mountain town will need all the visitors it can get, though the town is projecting a 20% drop in revenue this summer because of lost hotel rooms and campsite spaces.
So our message to visitors, we are open, we're accepting and welcoming visitors. We hope that they will come and visit us. And we encourage them to make those plans, make them early, and make sure they're booked in advance.
Mayor Ireland says that by May, most of the debris will be cleaned up. Up next, stories from around southern Alberta. Don't go away. There are now 6 federal candidates running in the Lethbridge riding, including notable names such as incumbent Conservative MP Rachel Thomas and former Mayor and Liberal candidate Chris Spearman. As BCN has brought you conversations with most of the candidates, we had the chance to chat with Mark Slingerland. He's the Lethbridge candidate under the Christian Heritage Party. Mark and his party runs under the belief of the supremacy of God and the rule of law. BCN's Landon Hickok had a chance to sit down with Mark this week and ask him what his campaign priorities are.
So what was sort of your motivation in running for federal politics under the name of the Christian Heritage? And what's kind of your background that you want to take into Ottawa?
I think it's very important that voters in Lethbridge have a opportunity to vote for a candidate and a party that is pro-life without exception, especially in the context of the last decade or so in Canada, as euthanasia has gone from an idea to a reality to a situation where Canada is kind of a cautionary tale internationally now for how quickly it has expanded and how the safeguards that are supposed to be there seem not to actually be functioning, getting consultation and waiting periods and so on, that those are not being observed. And just that fundamental respect for human life and the value of every human life from conception to natural death.
What are your sort of angles in approaching the top issues that I would say most Canadians are faced with right now?
For sure. Debt, I mentioned already, that's actually a big one that comes into affordability. Among the issues, some things that lead to inflation and affordability issues are beyond the control of federal government, right? There's lots of factors that are just realities that we have to deal with. And yet, when we are now paying $125 million every day just to service the interest on the federal debt, that is a huge amount of money that is being stolen from future generations and is hurting Canadians right now. That's money that it's equivalent to one of the largest departments in our federal government, money that could much better go to the priorities of Canadians. So living within our means is certainly something that would help with affordability for every Canadian.
A grant of $50,000 was approved by the Alberta government for the initial planning work at St. Francis Junior High School, located in South Lethbridge. Carmen Momberket, board chair with Holy Spirit Catholic Schools Division, says it will be determined in the coming months whether the school will undergo renovations or be replaced with a new building, offering children a modern, fully equipped, functional, and safe facility.
Even with a modernization, can this building and all areas within the building, particularly those basement areas, be made fully functional and safe? If the answer is no, then the most obvious thing is then we have to look at new construction. What about the rest of the building where, even though there's no exposure anywhere in the building to things like asbestos, any version of construction and taking down new ceiling tiles with the old ceiling tiles underneath of them, there's asbestos. So then is it safe within the realm of reconstruction? If the answer is no, then it leads to a new build. The downside possibility of new construction is loss of space. New schools don't provide the amount of space for students to be able to do the things that students should be able to do. So those are some of the things we have to balance.
Over the years, we've had leaking in the school roofs, and our equipment isn't state-of-the-art quite yet, but hopefully we can get it to there. No air conditioning, and if you forget a water bottle, no drinking fountains, just those water bottle fill-ups.
So we've had multiple areas where there's been mold and different things that we've had to treat. And then, you have to displace students with that, which impacts learning. And so being able to actually not have to worry about and all the old structural when trying to provide an education for all these students. And the goal is, our hope is for it to be announced in the next budget. Hopefully, I guess it would be February that we're hoping that this could potentially be announced.
According to the Alberta government, St. Francis Junior High School was built in 1958. Members of the public had a chance to speak their mind Thursday at City Hall. The Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee heard concerns about the issue of metallurgical coal mining in the Rockies. Opponents of coal mining projects such as the Grassy Mountain project claim excess selenium will poison watersheds in southern Alberta. A representative of Northback Holdings, the company planning to run the Grassy Mountain project, also presented to the committee their solutions on excess selenium as a result from the mining. Affordability is a hot topic for Canadians. After the break, NDP candidate for Medicine Hat Cardston Warner, Jocelyn Johnson, gives us her thoughts on what is needed to help get affordability under control. And if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel.